Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our next event. I see that there are a few more people in the queue to get in, so we'll kick things off in about 1 minute. Happy to have everyone here. Don't be afraid to use the questions tool in case you have any questions for our speakers or anything else that will come to mind regarding topics that we'll discuss today. I'm really excited to have everyone join. All right, let's give this another minute and then we'll kick things off. Great, so let's get started. My name is Clara. I am the founder of Czech and Shine, and I'm very happy to have everyone here today. This is our third Funding Talks event, and today we'll be joined by these two amazing speakers, which I'll introduce in a minute. But before we get started, I would love to tell you a few words about our startup community called Czech and Shine. Czech and Shine has been around for almost 2 years now, and we do many activities in the startup world. We organize events such as this one you're attending tonight. We also have our regular newsletter with different growth tips and resources. We have an internship program. We have our blog posts and mentors. We also organize different networking activities, and we have our private community. So there are many things that we do, and I'm happy to have the chance to introduce everything today. All of the events and basically all the activities that we do circle around the main three pillars of our community, which are education, inspiration, and networking. So I really hope that you will be inspired today, that you will educate yourself a bit more about what it means to raise your seed round, and that you will have a chance to meet someone interesting as well. When it comes to our mentors, we do have amazing members from all these different companies that have joined us. Mentors are available on our website. I will show the link a little later and also share it in the chat so you can use it. And these mentors help our startups to scale and to be great at what they're doing. And like I mentioned, we do have a community on Facebook. We currently have about 1,000 members that are in our community, and it is a safe space to join, to ask questions, to follow all our activities. So if you haven't joined yet, please do check Startup Community on Facebook. So all of our resources, all of our events, all of our blog posts, all of our mentors are on our website, and you can also follow any of the social links at Czech and Shine, where we try to share everything regularly. If you follow us on Instagram, you will get a bonus. Every 3 weeks, we host a live session called Leaders Uncovered with different leaders from the Czech business scene. So I hope to see you there as well. All right, well, let's get to Funding Talks. Funding Talks is a series we started this year, and the purpose of this event is to really connect the CEE region and introduce to you the different investors that are in the regions, and also show the investors that we have some amazing projects here as well. So we did have our Accelerators, we had our Angels events. Today we'll be talking about seed investment, and then next year we'll have another 3 events on Series A, Series B, and IPO with some exciting investors from companies like Index Ventures, Digital Plus Partners, or Enern. So I'm really looking forward to hosting those. And let's introduce our speakers. I would love to invite them both to the stage. Reshma and Andrej, can you hear me? Are you with us? Amazing.
Yeah. Great.
Hi. Let me just quickly stop sharing. We can see if I can change the video here. How are you today, Reshma? How are you doing?
Good. It's been a busy day traveling around Europe. I can't tell where I was just before this. It was on Hopin, but it was I don't know, it was France or it was supposed to be in Helsinki, but no slot.
Wow.
So I guess it was London, really.
Wow, exciting. So a long day of events for you today.
Definitely, but good fun.
Amazing. Andrej, how are you?
Good. I digitally just returned from Hungary about an hour ago, so still within the Austro-Hungarian Empire, I suppose.
Amazing. I'm really happy you took the time to meet with us here today to talk to our community. So for those of you who don't know your companies and yourselves, can I ask you for a little introduction? Reshma, how about if you go first?
Sure. So we are very much focused on pre-Series A. We're a seed investor across the European footprint, pre-seed and seed. So for us, that sort of round sizes are anything from a couple $100,000 all the way to 2 million or so. We're very horizontal. We look at all kinds of sectors. Less, I think, we're less active in hardware and kind of drug discovery, but even sort of software relating to biology, health tech is definitely a big area for us. Obviously, fintech, B2B, SaaS. I mean, like I said, pretty horizontal. And it is pan-Europe. So for us, that includes, Israel all the way on the east, and then westwards from that, Nordic, south. Certainly very active in CEE region. Our first Romanian investment was in Gradient with Emmy, and our friends at Credo followed on in that. We've now become investors in Ezra. And then thanks to being on the advisory board for a while at Credo, I got to see UiPath for the first time. So we're in there together as well. And then Rosum AI is a great Czech company we also backed about a year ago. So we're active in the Czech region, in Romania, Poland, etc.
Amazing. Thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy that, I was thinking who we could get for, the seed talk, and I'm really happy that we have Seedcamp here. So I think this...
It's in the name, I guess, yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Andrej, how about you tell us a bit about yourself as well?
Sure. So, hi, my name is Andrej Kiska. For those of you looking for the Slovak president, unfortunately, I have to disappoint you, he's not coming. It's just going to be me, his younger version. So I'm a general partner at Credo for the past decade, which is basically my entire working career. And Credo is a Prague-based VC fund focused on founders from Central Europe that have global ambitions and potential. Like Reshma and at Seedcamp, we also invest primarily at seed stage, somewhere between pre-seed, seed, and Series A. And we can discuss what that actually means, as I think it's different for every country. Pretty active in the Czech Republic, I suppose, since that's where we are based. We made 50 investments in the past 10 years, and I think 40% of those come from Czech Republic, and always looking to do more.
Amazing. Thank you for the introduction. I think you are pretty well known on the Czech market, but I'm really happy that Seedcamp also has some investments here as well in an amazing team like Rosum AI. So that's really cool. All right, so let's get started. Andrej, I'll actually have the first question for you, which would be, before I actually start raising my seed round, what do I need to do to prepare myself for this whole process? Do I get feedback? Do I start reaching out to investors? What's sort of the first step I should take?
Yeah, so it really depends on how you define sort of preparation of the company to start fundraising. Because when I look at mine investments for past 2 years, I would say over 50% of them were to founders that I've known for over a year. So if there was one recommendation to make for founders, particularly here in Central Europe, is speak to VCs often, even when you are not fundraising actively. Start building those relationships. start getting feedback. That way, when you actually start the fundraising process, all of that is already known to you. You already have the connections. It's not sort of an artificial start of a process. It actually should be sort of a very natural, continuation of a relationship you have already built before. So from this perspective, I would say, don't make it something special. Speak to investors as part of sort of regular building of your company and getting feedback from that company. And then, fundraising will just come naturally to you.
Okay. Absolutely. Reshma, what do you think defines a VC scalable company, right? How do I know that with my idea, I should actually start looking for VC money and scale?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I was actually going to exactly do that. Is even a bit of homework as well on the side of the founders or teams is just, do you want to go down that journey, right? It's a path, and once you're on it, it's hard to get off of that highway, the venture capital highway as such. Whereas if you're building it not that way, then you can always come on as well. Depending is, critically, how do you prepare kind of to raise VC money? And look, it's all market driven, it's all contextual, it's all relative. That is, today things are harder. You need more growth momentum. You need to show how you can get to that 100 million revenue size business. You need so on and so forth. And it sort of depends too which VCs. I think we didn't need sort of $1 billion outcomes when we started in 2007 with sub 20 million fund. Now that we're 60 million and then an 80 million fund, we do need those outcomes. So, Credo similarly, right? And so I think that's also relevant, is who you're pitching to and what do they need you to become? And do you want to buy into that? But again, back to that is, I was just interviewing the founder of Hopin. It's sort of just beaten Skype as the fastest from zero to unicorn in 17 months. So wow. It's a ridiculous journey, right? And for good or for bad, I think it's great for Europe as a sort of a marker and a story, but for good or bad, that means the bar keeps rising all the time. And we are fund managers at the end of the day. We're looking at relatively what's going to be faster, easier, better relationships with the founders. We love to actually have good relationships with founders as well. So it's what will be that whole package? Can we add value and so I think growth and that momentum and moats and differentiators, what's truly differentiated, what's that USP that we look at a lot. What's your team makeup? Is there sort of diversity of diversity meaning complementarity in the team and so forth. So it's a lot of homework you need to do before you go out wanting to raise.
Absolutely. Would you actually recommend to founders to reach out to investors like yourself to recommend them, if they should go down this journey, if they do have the scalable idea, or if you see potential after a year or two of work that this could become something big? Do you think it's good for them to actually get the feedback directly from investors?
Yeah, I think as Andrej said, we also love it when we've got a bit of a relationship building before there's a pitch. That said, I think just because the volume, so that's the other thing. Different funds, different volume, right? Approaches different, hours is different as well. And so just because of the nature of the volume, we do make investments. So we make a new investment every 10 days. There isn't that kind of time to necessarily have a lot of those kinds of conversations and build some of those relationships. But for the sort of check sizes we're writing, also our process makes sense, right? Our speed makes sense. And you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want a VC writing a 30 million check to take that speed either. So yeah, just get to understand who this sort of small universe of the kinds of people you want to take money from is, what drives them, what are the nuances, but absolutely, I think especially locally, wherever you're starting from, whether it's Copenhagen or Prague or whatnot, is there are some, there's some definitely like standout funds and standout people. And so that's a great resource. If you know other founders who've done it before you, that's a great resource. Just, you got to immerse yourself in these ecosystems.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrej, you actually mentioned that you get in touch with the founders approximately a year before you invest. How do you get in touch with them? How do they get in touch with you?
So the business of Credo is in investing, being the first institutional Czech in the most ambitious Central European founders we can find. And from this perspective, number one source of our deal flow today is just recommendation from other founders we are either invested in or know well. And so when I meet with our founders, I always ask, hey, who did you bump into who is starting something new, which is exciting? Who should I be speaking to? And that's where I get a lot of my recommendations, right? So I literally have actually a list of people, that I, in my CRM kind of, who I reach out to and say, hey, what are you working on? What is it that you work on the weekend? That way, when the time is right and when they decide to make that leap to raise an outside round or start a company, we are already there and we already have that relationship. So I guess that's how we try to form the relationship. And many times those people come from our portfolio companies or are friends with our other portfolio companies. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What would you recommend to those first-time founders who are maybe not in touch with the community or not in touch with other founders yet? How to sort of, because I can expect that cold emails would be very, on the bottom of your list. So how can they actually, get in touch and gather feedback, not necessarily, from you as investors, but generally from the community?
Yeah, I think it also comes back to what Reshma said about the answer to finding out if venture is right for you. And one of the ways is, speak to other founders who already have taken venture money and see what they think. And from this perspective, Prague is a very small town, right? In terms of number of companies that receive venture funding per year, it's in low tens. And the good news about that is that the new generation of founders here is more used to paying forward than perhaps what Eastern Europe was known for back in the day. And so they are used to mentoring and taking calls with other founders who are just at the beginning of their journey, right? So Tomáš Gogar, who we spoke about from Rosum, mentors other founders very often as well. So, I don't think it's that difficult, particularly in Prague, to seek out who are the people who have already raised the funding and just trying to reach out and say, hey, I'm a fellow founder starting my journey. Would you spare a few minutes for me? And that's how you sort of can enter that community. And then one referral leads to another. And, it's a very small town over here.
And yeah, and I think I'll pick up on that and be pushier in that nowadays it's really no excuse. I would say in 2020 every village has a startup ecosystem, right? And so there's and if not offline, if you really are remote in a village, and if not offline events, then certainly online. There's communities, right? GitHub, and there's loads of communities to also hang out in and meet other like-minded people, other founders. And then the other thing I'll say is I think as you are, entering the ecosystem or you're kind of working within it, I think you've got to be impressive. Whoever that's, whatever that's to, whoever that's to, is you've got to be impressive on something, is stand out, is, on a very technical front or sort of sales or marketing or, growth, storytelling, sort of whatever it is, you've got to have, just as a company, you need to create differentiators, and that moat, like I said before, is you need a personal sort of differentiator and moat because it's become, it's viruses are hard to talk about in these times, but it's entrepreneurship has gone viral, and there are so many different kinds of. Now entrepreneurs, everyone's sort of going out to make their mark, so you need to stand out.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love how you mentioned that. It's Prague is very small, and this is sort of like a startup village. I had few months ago, I signed up for a lunch club, and my first match was a founder from Tel Aviv. And in about 5 minutes, we figured out 5 people that we know each other, that we kind of have in common, right? He was in StartupYard, in the Czech Accelerator, right? So it was unbelievable, and it was my first match. So I think that you're absolutely right that you have to reach out and like Andrej mentioned, pay forward, but also not forget to offer help in return. I've noticed that there are a few founders that are kind of new to the market, and they expect sort of for everyone to hand them everything on the silver plate as well. So I think it's sort of a back and it has to be back and forward relationship. Amazing. So. Reshma, how long does the process of seed investment take within Seedcamp? What sort of time span can founders expect when they raise from you?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's again sort of driven by our timelines. It's all very, very fast, and hence I think we do make judgments pretty fast, hence the referrals and a lot of different things add up. So in our sort of pre-seed, if you're raising less than $1 million, we have kind of a regular process where we meet several companies all in kind of a day or two, and it happens extremely regularly. So you pretty much meet. You have one sort of phone call or one type of form you fill, one phone call, and then one partner meeting. And then we give the decision within a week, basically. And then with seed, I guess not dissimilar, same thing. It's like one quick half-hour call with 1 or 2 or so people, then a partner pitch with all of us, and then the same thing is we can pretty much tell you within a week or so. But that the seed depends, because pre-seed we lead those million rounds. We can bring the syndicate together and so forth. In the seed rounds, which tend to be more kind of at that 2 million size, euros, dollars, pounds, whatever, we tend to co-lead or be a follower or check-in. So say we're doing something with Credo, if they're leading, then we'll kind of take their pace and their sort of terms they're setting and whatnot, and we'll tend to follow those terms for the seed. So we work with the flow, either we set it happily, but at a smaller size, or we work with the flow of the bigger guys like Andrej.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Amazing. You make it sound very, very simple. I'm wondering how time consuming is this for the founder, Andrej? How much time should the founders dedicate to raising, especially a seed round? Because I suppose that's, sort of when you're new to the market.
Yeah. One interesting stat I read this year is, I think it was from first round, that sort of the number of days it took, I think it was 2008 or something, from first meeting to term sheet was 90 days. And then it was reduced to 9 in 2020. Right. And so I guess the good news for the founders from that is that actually, I guess it doesn't take that long anymore. I don't think sort of the Czech Republic is on the same pace in terms of the speed of deal making as some of the more robust ecosystems. So with that being said, I guess we do like to take a little bit of time, and I think it's actually beneficial for the founder as well, because at the end of the day, you want to build a relationship with the investor that you will be working with for the next decade, right? So from this perspective, we do try to form those relationships, and we also try to lead our pre-seed and seed rounds, and therefore try to be hands-on. And if you have a lead investor who will probably take a board seat with you and spend a lot of time, you want to make sure that there is some chemistry between the founder and the investor. And I think that's sort of the most important part of why the timeline may be important to go along. With that being said, we have the same strategy as what Reshma mentioned. So when there is a bigger fund setting the pace, or if there are other funds setting the pace, then we have to accommodate that pace, right? Like, we don't want to lose out because we are too slow. We already learned that in a painful way in the past decade, I can tell you that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the chemistry, and I think you actually spoke about this on one of our other events as well. That it's sort of like marriage, right? But in the investor startup sort of way.
So I would say it's actually more committing than a marriage from the perspective of you can get a divorce if things are going poorly. But getting a divorce from a board member, it's extremely difficult, and you are not going to get them out of cap table, or like there's it's extremely complicated. So in some ways, you can actually view it as a relationship that is harder to unwind in a certain matter than a marriage would be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talking about the relationship, Reshma, what do you think are the benefits of working with a VC fund, or generally with an investor when building your company?
I mean, I think there's so much, there's so much about it is how you go into it, and so I think when so we don't take a board seat. We always take an observer role, and it kind of, again, part of our model is that's how it works best. So in a way, we can sort of help advise quite a bit for founders. Is, look, if you come in and your expectation is, I've got VC money, these are sort of my bosses as such, or I've got to do this reporting to them. You're starting off on the wrong foot, and it probably sets the pattern for not going well. A little bit like dating as well. If you kind of I'm not feeling good today. I'm not. This person doesn't sound as interesting or whatnot, right? And so it's about that. And then versus, I think, if you kind of come in and saying, with the VC investor, is the reason you chose them, hopefully in the first place, is there was alignment, something resonated, and you thought they can help you with things. And so I think we look at it as not necessarily peer, but sort of consultative, and that is you can lean on, and that you can communicate with, and that can be cathartic and useful, and help raise questions for you as CEO and your kind of early team to have to think about critically, tie different things together as part of your whole company as such. So sort of to push and help question you, help you think. But hopefully the best VCs are not there to tell you the answers, and not treating you like you report to them. So yeah, I think the best relationships are that where and I even as a VC early days, and Credo did this with I'm on their advisory board, is whatever you call it, and I had a board as well, is I really looked to them to be like, great, where can I get some free labor from you, free support, for advice, cut some things I don't need to research 10 times about and find the same answer everyone else does. So if you get into it that way, it can set up such a great relationship. And my number one rule with all founders is just communicate with me, bad, good, ugly, great, communicate often enough sort of with us, and don't hold even all the good news or even all the bad news for a board event. That's probably the worst. You should have worked a bunch of things before that and talked about those things, or introduced those things you might need to work through in that meeting. But communication, again, a marriage, so communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And from that perspective, I feel like as a C-stage investor, we try to get in a position when, if there is some problem, we are the first one the founder calls, right? So you want to become somebody, because the role of a CEO is, at the end of the day, a pretty lonely job, right? You cannot sort of communicate all your stresses and worries to your employees, because you might stress them out. You might not want to communicate all of it to your peers. So that's sort of a role that an investor can take. That when there are bad news, you just pick up the phone and you just talk about it. And I think that our aspiration is to be that number one person that you call when trouble arises.
Absolutely. So there has to be some sort of balance. You cannot babysit the founders, but they have to be sort of coachable in order to, and sort of be open to your ideas or your suggestions or your calls sometimes in order to make the relationship work. And of course, vice versa. I think that's really, really amazing. I really think that one of the other great adventure, in benefits in terms of working with a VC investor, especially in the sort of early stage, is then probably the network that you both have in terms of, when the company grows and they're ready for, another round of funding, a Series A. I believe that you can actually help the founders to get connected, right? Or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's like another great advantage of working with great investors from the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've built a whole sort of brand around it, and call it Seedcamp Nation. And in our Seedcamp Nation, our founders are central to that. That is sort of us and our team and venture partners, EIRs, and so forth, and our LPs also. So we have like 80-ish of our founders who've invested in our companies. The Credo guys have also invested in our fund as well. So yeah, that's this whole Seedcamp Nation and that flywheel that constantly sort of we put nutrients into, and it helps each other. And one of the things I think, or like take the Credo guys, you're going to have someone on the board, kind of work actively with you, very sort of actively. We don't pretend to sort of do that, but what we then can bring, alongside again, or some angels or whatnot, is that we can say, look, you can have we have 400 companies, so you can have, if you're a B2B SaaS, company, you're selling is like, you can have your first 100 customers at Seedcamp or within the Seedcamp Nation, or 400 companies is like 1,000 founders. If you're a B2C, like you can have your first 500 users at Seedcamp, right? 1,000. So yes, I mean, again, it all goes back to like research who you want to be with, and different brands bring different things to the tables, which may or may not be a good fit for you. But yeah, the network is a big, certainly for our brand, it's a big factor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same here. I think that, I moved to the US primarily to build out the network as well. And so we spent there a couple of years. Another news on our end is that we recently hired our talent partner, Teresa, who comes from Product Board, who sort of scaled the people operations there. The thesis behind that is that, aside from sort of investor and plugging them into the US network, helping them build out the teams, both sort of on the technical side as well as the business side, is very important. So we try to sort of double down on that as the investor who is here locally in Central Europe, trying to scale those tech teams back at home.
Absolutely. I think Credo is very famous for sort of building the bridge over the ocean for the companies, that are not only that their target market is the US, but that also want to raise in the US, their next rounds. So I think that's really, really amazing. Great. So what are some of the values or key skills, Andrej, you look for in your founders?
So I would say values and skills are sort of two buckets that can be different, right? Like if I would look at values, I would think about I'm describing sort of character traits, and then skills are sort of, the more sort of tactical hard skills that they acquire. So if you ask me about values, I would say like there's the Warren Buffett's 3I framework, which is integrity, intensity, and intelligence. So I think actually that sums it up pretty well, right? Like you have to be smart, honest, and driven to be able to build a big startup. And one, I would add sort of a particular character trait in Central Europe. The disadvantage of smaller markets is that your peer group is not as strong. Meaning that if you are number one of something in the Czech Republic or number 10 of something in the Czech Republic, you kind of already think that you conquered the world. And so that's why like we encourage people to like go and see the valley, even if they don't have business there yet, because if nothing else, like they acquire a sense of humility of like what is like a benchmark of excellence on some of the larger markets. And so I think sort of the character trait or the value we look for there is sort of a mix of humility and willingness to learn, because it's sort of ironic that in a small market like ours, I tend to see more arrogance in founders sometimes than I see in the valley, because they sort of think that, oh well, I am already number one here in Prague or something. So that's on the value side, and on the skill side, what we look for in teams when we make an investment is we try to ask the question of, okay, why does this team have a unique insight into a market, and why do they have a unique way of perceiving a certain market problem, and why are they uniquely equipped to solve that problem, right? So we sort of call that a founder market fit, meaning that they sort of spend some time on the market, maybe because they had a job there before, or they just did like an extensive deep dive on the topic they're obsessed about, and they sort of generate some sort of a unique worldview on a particular thing on the market. And then we ask the question of, okay, can this team, if they have something like this, build a scalable company around it, right? They have the skill set to build that product and to just start selling it. So I guess that's the framework through which we try to look at sort of founders and what we try to aim at analyzing at the seed stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, like you said, it's a mix of different characteristics and skills and past experience that works, right? Yeah, absolutely. Reshma, what about you? Is there anything else you look for in your founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that, and I think the sort of where, because we've been 15 years, and you're always like, oh, let's analyze the last 3 years or last fund where we invested in 100 companies and look at the founder traits and this where we come out to over sort of 15 years is, and I'm hearing it more and more with some of VC, Valley colleagues as well, is like the founders who sort of ride this fine line between between really tough to deal with and yet open, right? Being sort of very speedy in making decisions, being thoughtful about having done the homework, ask the right questions before, and assessing, getting in and then making some quick. So it's sort of this like fine balance of so many of these different, skills, traits, etc. And I mean, I guess underlying all of that is probably his value system, as Andrej said, around sort of ambition, wanting to kind of set your own rule of law in motion, which is what you do when you have a startup. Is like you set your own rule of law, and like how do you want to treat your people and culture. A lot of those things underpin a certain value system. And then on top is like this balance, this balancing actor. And I'd say, definitely our most successful founders are challenging to work with, and then also great. Like we also become such good friends where we're invited to each other's weddings, or things like so. And I wouldn't say they're not challenging still, but like clearly we get so you get through that. So yeah, anything worth having is like hard, right? And so I think the founders who are, again, just very opinionated, very decisive, but again, also will like communicate to say, hey, look, I have a question on this, I want to hear this out. Okay, great. I've asked 4 people, 4 smart people. I've got where I want to go on this, and they're stubborn as well. But again, when they hear enough, they're willing to, like, actually, I was just talking to MessageBird founder. He, for 100 million in revenue, till 100 million in revenue, he didn't raise. And then he raised like these 2 rounds the last kind of couple of years, right? And I was just asking him about kind of how are they approaching the future, which is hybrid, and will that look like? He said, literally until the pandemic, he refused remote work. So like he just didn't, he was like all about a centralized office, or even if 2 locations, 3 locations, like centralized. And literally since the pandemic, they've gone full remote, the entire company, and won't come back. And so, there's that person who's clearly stubborn for a very long time. And then, maybe the pandemic forced it, but like he sort of 180. And it's very hard to do. It's turn that ship.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I've heard this, like a description of this is having like very strong beliefs that can be easily pivoted. I think that was like the
very strong opinions mostly help.
Right.
Yeah, something. But I think what you mentioned is sort of the boldness comes from actually from knowing that you're the best for the job. I think every founder needs to know why they started the company and why they are the ones that are the best for for building it. I actually have a question from our audience, and that is, what is your opinion on solo founders? So on single founders in companies, do you recommend them to have a co-founder, or do you invest in solo founders as well, Andrej?
So to me, I guess as a good VC and a son of a politician, I will give you like an unclear answer of it depends, because it depends on what is it a sign of, right? Is it a sign of the founders sort of being in early stages, meaning sort of product exploration, idea inception stage, or is it a sign of a founder who sort of maximizes control or sort of governance over, wealth and company and value creation, right? So you can have solo founders for different reasons. And I would say that if they are a solo founder who doesn't want to have co-founders because they don't believe in shared responsibilities, and we see that, then that's a sign of a certain personality trait. If it's a solo founder because he just left his company and has this great idea he wants to pursue and is in the process of assembling the team together and wants to work with the investor on putting the team together, I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, I think it's a very good way. I think it is a very good way of answering that. I mean, you take Hopin, just when we backed him, where the product was, like he just really like, hey, I want to get some opinions on what this looks like, and yeah, I'm kind of raising, and we're like, here, you sign this, that 20 minutes into our 40-minute meeting, right? And so sometimes the sheets can be even shorter than nine days.
Right.
But so yeah, there where we were like literally one dude and like some wireframes, to more developed teams as well. Where yeah, and it depends again on complexity of sort of where the industry you're going after. Like, will you need kind of enterprise sales right away? Then you better have someone, and that can't probably be your CTO, because if you're selling something into the enterprise, likely it's complex technologically, and therefore you have pretty you have an engineering team as CTO, and so you have more of a well-formed team like we had with Harbor for example. So yeah, it does depend on your context, your situation, and so forth. But I will say, I think it's getting harder and harder to be sole founders, just because there's so much to do, and the pace at which everything is moving,
faster.
Like a lot. Yeah, it's just a lot more to do nowadays at a faster pace. So that's hard for one person to do. And critically, like Andres highlighted, is it's a sign, if you've been going too long, if you can't attract anyone else to join your company, I don't know how you're going to attract us to invest, or you know how to attract customers to buy from, because clearly no one wants to work with you. So
absolutely, yeah, and you're definitely right. I think this comes from a great deal of self-awareness in terms of the founders, whether they're a single founder or even 2-3 co-founders, understanding what are their really strongest sites, but also what are their weaknesses and when they need to hire first. And if it's a solo founder, if they're strong enough by themselves, or if they have a bigger weakness, like typical. I think what I've come across is, having a non-technical founder in a tech startup, they should understand, if they should hire a CTO right away to become their co-founder, or if they're capable to actually understand the market well enough to stand on their own. So yeah, it definitely depends. I have a last question from our audience on founders. I
just wanted to say, I particularly find highly technical founders the least self-aware. So I think there's an audience in here, I'm sure, that are like, oh no, I don't need it. It's like, you're probably extremely technical and therefore least self-aware. And so I think, bringing that co-founder to like build self-awareness in you, to like put a mirror up to yourself and sort of highlight some of the weaknesses and some of the issues. Sorry, I just wanted to add that bit.
Absolutely.
I think you summarized well something we call here the Central European bias, right? Because we are sort of the land of great engineers. So sometimes the great engineer thinks that building a company or selling the product is sort of beneath them, right? That the technology will sort of do it themselves. So yeah, it's definitely something we run into a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my quick question again from our audience on founders: do you vest your founders? Do they have vesting in their companies, or do they have the ownership right away once you invest in them? Andrej, why don't you go first?
Very strong religious views on this, which is like absolutely. And I think as a founder, you should want to have you in a vesting schedule. Because if I set the clock, then the next investor has a harder time to just completely reset it. So that's a good thing. And again, if you are kind of co-founders, if one of your, you've got an equity sort of split across a couple people, a few people, if one of them leaves, you are in big trouble if they take a big chunk of the company with them, if you don't have a vesting schedule. So I think if you're asking, then in a positive way, then that's a great sign to us as your VC that you get why vesting actually is in your interest and not in our interest.
Yeah, I agree. Like, sort of the way the question was framed is, do we vest the founders? Actually, I think the founders would want to vest themselves, right? Because I don't know how many examples of what Reshma just described where the team just sort of splits apart, and if there is 25% of the company that have gone rogue, then that's a very hard situation to deal with for founders vesting. So, even if you don't have an outside investor and you are thinking about starting a company, just do the founders vesting for yourself. It's not sort of for the investor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. So we have the term sheet signed, we have the money on the account, we have the vesting set up, everything is up and ready. What do you expect the founders to achieve within the seed stage? What do you think is sort of the main goal of the company during that time? What they should go through, and what should become of them in the year or 3 years that the seed stage that they will be in the seed stage. Andrej.
Wow, I keep on Clary being cold on these tough questions. All right, well, look, I don't want to be the politician here, but I don't think it's that clear cut, because ideally you have this conversation when you are raising the seed, right? Because one of the goals of the seed round is to give you enough runway to raise the next round. And in order to know how much runway you need, you sort of need to be able to imagine what that company is going to look like in that given time frame, typically 12 to 18 months, and say, okay, we think that to get to an A, this is what we need to achieve, and we think it's going to take this much capital and this much time. Now, that can be totally different. Let's use some examples. So there are companies, and it comes back also to how senior and experienced the team is, because there are teams, particularly of repeat founders, who can go and raise the seed and a quick A in a fast sequence, particularly in today's environment, without having a lot of traction. Some haven't still released their product. On the other hand, you might have startups that have north of 1 million ARR at seed stage and still are not able to raise that A. So that A, which sort of comes after our seed, is a very delicate balance and transition from a team-heavy fundraising, which it still is in many ways, right? Like it's the core asset you're selling, to showing some early traction and some signs of product market fit, right? And sort of the more holes are in the team, or the less experience the team has, the higher the pressure perhaps is on sort of the traction side to show more. But particularly in today's environment, at least what we see, our founders who are sort of coming in for a second company, they sort of can raise it in a quick sequence. And so for the first time founders, it's more about sort of building out that team, particularly on both product and sales side, and showing more traction before they get there. At least that's our experience. I don't know, Reshma, what are you?
Yeah, and I think to a few points sort of to add other nuances is like, in that time, kind of seed to Series A. Certainly, I hope it doesn't take 3 years. I know we're not interested in companies that take 3 years to get to. So, I mean, of course, things happen, but that's not the plan. Certainly, it's 12 months, 18 months, sort of. I think the biggest thing that also starts to happen is competition. Like I think more particularly sort of B2C, even sort of very kind of easy to or low value SaaS, low price point SaaS companies as well. There's a flood, and so you're like, so and so just funded, so. Credo funds someone in Prague, and we fund someone in London, and another VC, especially France. This is like France and Germany over and over again. It's like, they funded a French company, doing things. And you're like, so I mean, that competition definitely becomes, and this is why, again, Andrej's point before, like you got to get out of your bubble, be part of bigger bubbles, and because if you're particularly in a small bubble, and 5 competitors rise up in places like US, UK, Germany, it's troublesome. So I think so competition also arises during that time. And then I think, again, within that 12 months, like I always look at that's, pre-seed is like a hope and a dream. Seed is somewhere kind of more than hope and a dream, but, some around product market fit, early signs of it. I mean, I do think the Series A, why it becomes so tough to get through that bottleneck as such is because it's traction. Is like, show me your machine, like show me the car that we're working, and I can put some fuel in here called 5 million, 7 million, 10 million, whatever, a Series A, and out comes a whole lot of customers and a whole lot of revenue, right? And then BC, you're working on kind of expansions and profits and things like that. So I think each journey. So I think that's the other thing is like you need a model that really is starting to hum and it's got momentum and you got to be competitively well ahead and differentiated, all in that seed to Series A, alongside of course some milestones on. I don't know if even 1 million ARR is a thing anymore. Like I think again, to create momentum and buzz, you need sort of more than that, right? And it is sort of positive and negative bias spaces. Some things just, take the pandemic, like some things became very positively biased about tools and heck, when we first met Hopin as well, is like, this is a webinar company. What is this? So positive bias clearly, and then negative bias around different things. Like right now, for us to do a fintech company, that's yet another card, a debit card or whatever for someone is like, are you kidding me?
Absolutely.
So that that moved dramatically from Revolut days and TransferWise days of, here, take my money, please take my money, like to now just not sure, right? Because how are you going to rise above all the noise? So
yeah. So you mentioned actually a few things, right? So there's the product market fit. So kind of understanding what you're building, making some changes, and getting more people in and less people out of the product. So understanding what your churn is and how that happens. But you also mentioned competition, and I think that in the seed stage you should kind of figure out what are the 1 to 5 things why you're different, right? So that should sort of become visible as well. And Andrej actually mentioned that the first rounds of funding are sort of in the team, right? And then building the product. And then I think Series A to really Series B, you're sort of moving on from being a product company to becoming a sales company. And that's sort of the engine that needs to be running. And that's when you scale and you go 10x and 100x. So, and I because when I'm speaking about this, I notice a lot of founders actually think that seed stage is when you should really start focusing on sales and growth. But that's where you need to really make sure that what you're building is the right thing to build, right? And then, of course, you need to work with customers and work with feedback and continuously grow your revenue. But it's not the X factor that is probably expected, right?
And it's also tough from sort of CEO's time allocation, right? Because sort of your role sort of changes so dramatically, right? So sort of aside from the more general responsibilities of like you have to keep your company staffed and funded, particularly if you're a technical CEO, you're sort of going through this transition of, all right, like I built the first MVP, I code all day, to sort of raising my seed, and now kind of have a product, now trying to speak to customers and actually becoming the first salesperson of that company. And then towards sort of the second half of that seed, you actually have to start building out that sales team to start building that engine and a playbook that's repeatable by the end of Series A, right? So you really go through this very long transition in terms of like, what is the definition of your job as a CEO in a very short time span, which can be particularly challenging for a CEO who's doing it for the first time, who is strongly technical and sort of has a bias to build. But many founders who sort of went from the technical background and started selling realized that sort of, okay, well, this actually helps me understand much better the customer needs. It also helps me understand how to hire for that sales team. What do I need to look for? So it's another challenge to look for as a CEO, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, we are slowly running out of time. I have so many more questions here from the audience, but I do have, Reshma, one of the last two questions for you, and that is, what should founders look for in investors? So kind of, flipping the coin, what should I look for when I'm choosing my seed investor?
Yeah, and I think it's the sort of most fun question we get when we do get it from founders, right? And we have to think on our sort of about our value proposition as well. I mean, I think if you mapped out, say when you do product mapping, if you mapped out a kind of company mapping of where you want to take your journey and what kind of company you're trying to build and where and so forth. I think as you do the research on our website and our networks of founders we've backed, and again, if you're in Warsaw, there's founders we've backed there. If you're in Bucharest, there's that, and so wherever Helsinki, there's founders we've backed. So once you do all that research, is like I think sort of the universe does become smaller of who's a relevant kind of VC set of partners for you, of that what kind of things they can. It's free labor. I consider myself sort of, free, but like clearly I took equity, but anyways, it might be which might be worth zero, but at least you don't pay me for salary, right? Like it's like free labor. It's like, okay, what do if I got around the table, Clara, Reshma, and Andrej, like what do I want each of them to do? And it wouldn't be useful if both of them, like two out of those people can do literally the same thing as like, how's that sort of interesting, valuable. So yeah, it's like to really seek out again this group around the knights around the table that all kind of are going to be complementary, or Avengers, I should say, Avengers, and to be helpful to opening the U.S. or China for maybe that's your business, or India, or wherever. Maybe it's a particular vertical. Maybe it's that horizontal set of first customer or whatnot. So yeah, it's a lot of questioning, curiosity that goes into choosing your investors.
Absolutely. What do you think, Andrej? What are some of the key traits founders should look for in their investors?
Part of my answer would go back to what I said about sort of being the number one person the CEO calls. That you need to be able to be a shock absorber if that founder is going to call you with all his trouble, as opposed to a shock creator, right? And so from this perspective, sort of because many times I sit in a boardroom, like CEO brings some bad news, and then an investor sort of freaks out and just like perpetuates sort of that sort of negative emotion of the news. Which, I think that sort of a value you can bring to a founder is just a sort of a steadiness, sort of no matter what happens, right? And from this perspective, being there always for the founder, but at the same time being of the mindset of whatever happens, we are here to live tomorrow, and we help to see the founder sort of the bigger picture of why we are here, and no small tactical thing can typically derail that. I think is an important attribute, and one at least we try to cultivate here at Credo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can kind of detect this early on when you first get in touch with the investor. If they take 3 months to get back to you or to answer a simple question, right? If they're not approachable, then things won't probably change that much once they give you the money, and you won't have someone to rely on, right? So
100%. And like, even small things like cadence of communication. How long does it take for the investor to reply? Do they pick up the phone? Do they write back to the text message? You see those signs before the investment. And, there is a very good sign that if they behave this way when the pressure is high to make the investment, how is that person going to behave after that investment?
yeah, absolutely,
I think that's again, I think that of like marriage as well is like I picked my husband well in that in our worst moments, like we're actually like pretty good people to be with each other is like thank God, and versus some of the other choices that we made in life. And so you want to right early in a relationship, or early, we want to have that's why again I said like founders who challenge you, it's you see where's that line, and like where are they standing on that line of when you challenge each other, and you want to kind of have those conversations earlier to see the worst of the person. If they're kind of great when they're worst, you got a great relationship going.
My personal recommendation for that test is take them for a week to yacht week. It was the most like I don't know, Reshma and Clara, if you know it, but it's like a week on the boat with 50 other boats where you don't get any sleep because there is party at night and you wake up early in the morning because the boat is like way too warm and you're hungover, and you repeat it for 7 days and you're close in a very small premise. It certainly brings out, the true personality in people.
Wow. All right. My last question, and I'll start with you, Andrej. What would be your final words or recommendations to founders out there that are looking to raise their seed round in the next few months?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid. And I'm choosing these words for a particular reason, in that what we have seen in the past 6 months here in Central Europe is a certain drop in entrepreneurial activity. I think it's because there's sort of this period of uncertainty, right? Just like people don't know when is this going to end? Like, when are we going back to like something else or something like a new normal? And because we are sort of the first institutional investor in many of our companies, we very closely tend to match what's happening on the startup formation stage. And I would say that we have seen a significant decline in the second half of the year here. And the reason why I want to say don't be afraid is because I think that typically means that there is a very good set of circumstances going to be right around the corner. Because there is less competition, also because we'll be getting out of COVID, a lot of funds have a lot of money, there's a new set of opportunities that will be open. So if you are considering starting a company or raising that seed round, I understand it's a difficult time, but starting to think actively now about what those opportunities may look like, I think it's going to be a tremendous time for founders raising a seed round, particularly in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised by that. Like all the, the State of European Tech report came out, and all the stats say like September was the most kind of funded month ever in Europe, right? So I am surprised that you're seeing that. We're definitely seeing the opposite, and yeah, I wonder, like, in a lot of crises, a lot of startups are started, right? And so, or that's what I'm used to from like UK and US scene, at least. It's like that's when opportunities are found, and in those dark times, right? So yeah, so I'm that's interesting. I'm surprised. The other thing I'd say is, particularly for CE companies, I mean, you've been on a back foot for decades, like years, right? Compared to the kind of New York scene or Boston or San Francisco. I mean, what a great time! Like deals are happening, investments are happening completely on Zoom or remote, and so you don't have to you don't have to be from anywhere right now. And you can just serve a market. And so I think I don't think really worrying too much about being from Krakow, wherever is like matters, Cluj or whatever you're from. That's like Balkans, isn't it? But it doesn't matter anymore. It's like you just no, that's also Romania. Anyways, it just matters like what market are you serving, and you can hire amazing talent right now, wherever, right? And so, so yeah, I think just get yourself out of like the location mindset, and
Absolutely.
But still don't forget to speak to Credo, your local partner.
That's right.
Absolutely. Reshma, would that be your recommendation to the founders, or does something else come to mind as well, in terms of how they can prepare themselves, or what would be don't be afraid to get out of your local bubble, and go for it. Amazing. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. It was really great. I certainly learned a lot, so I hope that our audience did as well. I will definitely be sharing the recording of today's session, so I'll be very happy to see that posted tomorrow. Again, Reshma, Andrej, thank you so much for joining, and to the founders that are with us, don't forget to reach out when you'll be raising your seed round. We have some amazing investors here in the CEE, so
and perfect combination here,
That's right. That's
a recipe for success, I would say.
Proven recipe for success.
Amazing, perfect. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your busy event day today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Clary, for having us.
Cheers and take care. Bye.
Bye.
Amazing. And thank you everyone for joining us as well. If you want to check out our website, please, you can definitely do that at checkrunshine.cz. You can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or on Instagram, where we do our lives with leaders from our Czech business scene every 3 weeks. So I'm hoping to see you there. Thank you again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.